Welcome to Honoring the Honorable, a podcast of Seven Oaks Classical School where I, your host, Dr. Ship, interview members of our school community. Join us as we talk about the work we do with those who do it. The contributions vary, but each is worthy of honor. Welcome to an episode of Honoring the Honorable, our new Seven Oaks podcast. I'm here today with Jamie Crowhurst, the president of the board of directors. Jamie, thank you for joining us. I wonder if you could tell listeners a little bit about yourself. We'd love to get to know you a bit better.
Well, thanks, Dr. Ship. As you said, my name is Jamie Crowhurst. I hail from Northern California, not from Indiana. Moved here about 7 years ago when I retired from the Air Force. My wife and I decided to make Indiana our home because our daughter, our only daughter, came to IU. So that brought me to this great state of Indiana. But the board piece came, as you know, from a military connection that I had, an old friend who you had got to know, a gentleman named Mark Dillon. That introduction eventually led to an opportunity for me to join the school board.
Very good. Now, I know you don't like to talk about yourself, but how long were you in the Air Force?
I served for 30 years in the Air Force. Was commissioned in 1987, which is fun for Mr. Battalia's Cold War history class. I can come and talk to that every once in a while. And served until 2017.
Okay. And forgive me for pressing a little bit, but what I think listeners might be interested to know what rank you attained to.
I retired as a colonel, and that's within the military. You can kind of decipher some of that. The length of service. We're an up and out system, so if you retire as a colonel, 30 years, essentially that was the end of my run. That's as long as I could go. So,
yeah. Your first major involvement with the school came as our graduation speaker a few years back, and I still remember that and I'm very grateful for it. But I wonder, you've clearly done a lot of community service since you retired from the military. I happen to know, probably more than the listeners. But I wonder if you just speak a little bit to that, what it is that drives you to serve your community in different ways now that you've retired from the military.
I guess the driver for me is my faith, and this idea, this word that hopefully I think we'll dive into as we continue this conversation, but this idea of service, and that word particularly, I mean, military service is so maybe it's an outgrowth of what I did, but when we moved to Bloomington, I didn't intend to not work, but I was intentional about not working when we first moved here. And as I got kind of connected with the Bloomington community, there is this is a community where I live in Bloomington that is very service minded. There's a lot of organizations, and the first organization that really caught my eye was the Boys and Girls Club. It was through a friend, and I got pretty involved serving there. But again, it really was an outgrowth of my faith that I first really had a chance to exercise outside of just compulsory, this is your job, do you really want to exercise this idea of service? And I found that I enjoyed it. And retiring when I did, young enough that I could maybe have some impact in some places. And so that's what brought me to this idea of service. And then, of course, you brought up a chance to speak at the graduation, and seeing, for me, service too is about mission alignment. And the Boys and Girls Club, trying to create caring, productive, and responsible citizens of young people. And Seven Oaks mission kind of had some alignment too. So that's kind of maybe what pulled me in the direction of Seven Oaks.
Yeah, I think I want to press you a little bit on that. I wonder if you'd say just a word more about what did attract you to go ahead and get more involved in Seven Oaks, and particularly in the form of board service.
The mission alignment of a wonderful and rigorous classical education that really does train the hearts and improve the minds. If we bring moral character and civic virtue into the equation, we're creating what I believe is really important for our country today. Citizens who are ready to, when they leave this first watershed point of our educational system of high school, they're ready to be productive and responsible citizens, which we need in our country. What a great opportunity to be involved with a school that takes that seriously.
I want to kind of pivot slightly. You very kindly emceed our Veterans Day program for these last several years, and this year is no exception. But I want to give you just a chance to reflect a bit on the connection that you see between the mission of the school and efforts by the school to honor those who have served our country in different ways, in this case, particularly through the armed services.
Any society doesn't function well if there aren't well-equipped citizens. And if your school or your organization wants to be intentional about that, then it's that idea of being intentional about honoring those who are being good citizens. But ultimately, there's a bigger picture, and in public service, it's the Constitution. It's our Constitution.
Yeah, that seems like a very rich idea, that somehow we all are looking for something larger than ourselves to serve, that gives meaning and then actually creates the context for the deepest sense of community. All right, I want to turn in a little bit of a practical direction.
Sure.
You are on the board, and in fact, you've fairly recently assumed the presidency of the board. You have people who kind of wonder what the board's working on and how someone comes to be on the board. And I wonder if you would just say a few words about the work of the board, how someone who might be interested in service in that way, how that process typically works to be considered for membership on the board.
Certainly. A school board in particular has got some unique roles, but boards are an oversight organization, and with the idea that our school has a very defined mission and we want to stay aligned with that mission. So the board is first and foremost seeking alignment of the school with the mission, and obviously to do that there are resources that have to be gathered, employed, and used to meet that mission. And so oversight of that process of expending resources and acquiring resources and ensuring that the mission is done. In a very practical way, the board is not running the school. You are leading that effort with an amazing staff of teachers. So part of the board's responsibility, too, is when you have a head of school like yourself, to provide that kind of supervisory role to the head of school. So it gives you somebody who is hopefully looking out for the mission and is helping to oversee the resource accumulation and execution, but then also it gives you a pathway, and hopefully it's a partnership too. Since, as you mentioned, I've got the chance to become the president recently, but part of what I really like about it is that now you and I meet monthly so that we can kind of talk about that oversight relationship and role.
And now record podcasts together.
And do podcasts, which I didn't expect. But now, as far as joining the board, and maybe we'll talk about this a little further here, but our school is not new anymore, but it's still newer, and I wasn't in that beginning phase of, but school board has, formed, and so there was a set of board members. A board has a set of bylaws, and we've just recently kind of amended those to really be intentional about the process and how we bring board members on, the terms that we serve as board members, and then a process to have elected positions within the board, and also the turnover of the board.
Yeah, I think a lot of people don't realize that the original board was working on this project for something on the order of 3 years before the school ever obtained its charter and was in a position to hire a school leader and open a school. I think as a kind of more practical matter, we have a self-perpetuating board, but I wonder if you'd say just a little bit about what a self-perpetuating board is and maybe the basic rationale for it.
Great. We are all volunteers, obviously, but we elect our new board members now. I met with you and Matt Wolf, who's now serving as our vice president, was our long-serving president of the board and one of those founding members. I was impressed with what the school was doing, and you guys came to me and we started a conversation, and now we're formalizing that process. But a board's an important, when you think about oversight, you need to have various skill sets. So those who on our board is a gentleman named Terry English, who also happens to be an attorney, having legal professional Jerry, as a banker, is a wonderful treasurer for our board. So experience base and diversity of experience, pretty important for our board. So as we really develop our recruiting processes, I see us continuing to perpetuate the board that way, and that we maintain those skills that we need for oversight and assistance to mission alignment.
Yeah, it seems like when we've talked in the past, the two things I've heard you say you want to prioritize is having a relevant skill set that someone brings to the position, having an alignment with the mission of the school, someone who's really excited about what it is that makes the school distinctive in ways that's reflected in the school's mission statement. Tell me, I hope I'm not amiss in saying that the board actually really welcomes people expressing interest in the possibility of service and would welcome the chance to start a conversation about what future involvement could look like.
Absolutely. I can't think of a better way for an interested citizen who wants to make an impact in young people's lives to explore the option of, hey, could I be a part of this board? There are many other avenues of serving our school, probably outside of the board too. So it's not an exclusive thing either. There's a need for service in a lot of areas.
Absolutely. I suspect some of our listeners would love to see the school through your eyes. I wonder, Jamie, if you'd say just a few words about where you see the school and where you see it headed. What kind of work is the board contemplating for the next little stretch here? I wonder if you have some thoughts along those lines.
Sure. We're positioned now where, a K through 12 school that has 550 plus students and with a path to hopefully growing a little further. We got waiting lists in a lot of our lower grade, very full 10th grade in the high school that could fill out but more importantly, a school that is churning out young people with missionally aligned, as we would hope, citizens ready to engage enrolled in a university, employed in a place that is opportunity for them to make a living and make a difference, or even enlisting in the military. So, and our board, what are we thinking about? Now have those founding board members, and some of who are still with us, some that we've recognized, and so we're in that traditional process of honoring those who have served, but also looking forward to where do we want our school to be in 10 years? That's part of the board's role too, is to set along working with you, the kind of the strategic vision of our school. And that's really where the board is starting to, I think we're starting to hopefully embrace our role as helping to set that vision. This facility that we have sits on a piece of ground that we have now been able to acquire some adjacent pieces of ground and acquire a few more and build out a athletic field. Those are the, some of the things as we think along with you, how do we acquire, how do we execute the resources necessary for all that.
Well, I know it's, from my perspective, a very exciting time. The school has been growing these last 9 years. We've received the renewal in our charter. We're in a position of relative stability. For so much of that time, particularly as concerns facilities, the next task has been fairly obvious. We had this great big building and we needed to renovate to stay ahead of growth. But now we've just about finished renovating the building. Really just the exception is the basement of the gym. There's a lot of room to think about what our strategic priorities are. Some things are fixed. You and I have talked about. We have a mission that is settled. We have a curriculum and a way of teaching that we're excited about. But there's a lot of room to think about these next 5-10 years. And I know I'm grateful for the opportunity to work with you and the rest of the board on this question.
Well, thanks. I appreciate the chance to serve alongside you, and I know that my fellow board members and for our listeners, that's part of why I'm excited about being on this board too. Is it's people who are mission aligned with our school and want to see its success. So I see great things in Seven Oaks' future.
Well, I think you've reminded our listeners that it's an exciting time to be part of Seven Oaks. It's an exciting time to be thinking about ways to become more deeply involved in the school community and perhaps even serve in different ways, maybe even the board. We'll look forward to keeping the community at large updated on some of these ideas that we're working on that hopefully will continue to take shape over the course of this year. And Jamie, thank you for joining us for this podcast. With that, we are going to wrap up this episode of Honoring the Honorable. Until next time, thank you, Jamie.
Thanks, Dr. Ship.
Thank you for listening to Honoring the Honorable, a Seven Oaks podcast.